The event hall of the Emperor Hotel gleamed under crystal chandeliers, like a showcase of borrowed dreams. 200 executives dressed in Italian suits held champagne glasses while discussing corporate mergers and stock portfolios. The aroma of smoked salmon mixed with expensive perfumes that cost more than Marina Reyes earned in an entire month, 3 months to be exact. Marina felt the world spinning in slow motion as she walked between tables with a tray of canapes that weighed as if she were carrying stones. Her legs trembled with each step, but she kept her back straight and the professional smile she had perfected during the past 11 months. No one in that room knew she had started her day in that same building 16 hours earlier, serving breakfast coffee in the downstairs buffet hall. No one noticed that the hands now offering gourmet appetizers were the same ones that had cleaned 32 rooms in the executive wing during the afternoon. The buzzing in her ears intensified. The voices around her became a distant murmur, as if someone had submerged her head underwater. Marina blinked, trying to focus her vision, but the chandelier lights multiplied into dancing stars. Her last conscious thought before her knees gave way was, "Daniel. Daniel needs me to get home." The silver tray hit the marble floor with a metallic crash that cut through all conversations. 120 canapes of foie gras and caviar scattered like dominoes across the immaculate floor, and in the middle of that culinary disaster, a 34-year-old woman weighing 106 pounds lay unconscious, her black waitress uniform wrinkled and her face pale as porcelain. Sebastian Montero, heir to the hotel empire his grandfather had built from scratch, watched the scene from the main table. It wasn't the collapse that caught his attention. At events like this, there was always some minor drama. It was the expression of the banquet manager, who looked at the fallen woman with a mixture of irritation and recognition that seemed too specific, too personal. As paramedics arrived, and the crowd dispersed murmuring about the incident, Sebastian couldn't take his eyes off the woman's worn shoes. Black loafers with soles so thin she probably felt every crack in the pavement when walking. On the middle finger of her right hand was a small callus, the kind that forms from writing by hand for hours, and on her wrist, barely visible under the sleeve cuff, a bracelet woven with colored threads, the kind of craft that children make in school. Marina opened her eyes in the hotel's infirmary, a small but impeccably clean room that smelled of isopropyl alcohol and industrial detergent. The on-duty nurse, a Filipino woman around 50 named Rosa, held her wrist, taking her pulse while frowning. "Your blood pressure is through the floor, mija. When was the last time you ate something?" Marina tried to sit up, but Rosa stopped her with a firm hand. I ate this morning, bread with butter and coffee." "What time?" "At 5. Or 5:30, I'm not sure." Rosa looked at her watch. It was 11 at night. "That was 18 hours ago, Marina. Your body isn't a machine." The door opened and Carlos Mendoza entered, the hotel's human resources manager. He was a corpulent man, with a carefully trimmed mustache and an expression that oscillated between professional concern and administrative irritation. "Mrs. Reyes, we need to talk," he said, and the tone of his voice made Marina's stomach contract more than it already was from hunger. Rosa looked at Carlos with evident disapproval. "She just fainted. It can wait until tomorrow." "It's precisely because of that it can't wait," Carlos responded, though he had the decency to seem uncomfortable. "Marina, Mr. Salazar informed me that he saw you this morning on the breakfast shift, then on the cleaning crew during the afternoon, and now in banquet service. Is it true that you're working in 3 different positions within the same hotel?" The silence that followed was dense as smoke. Marina felt her mouth go dry. The contract she had signed 11 months ago was clear. Emperor Hotel employees were prohibited from maintaining multiple simultaneous positions to avoid conflicts of interest and guarantee exclusive dedication to each role. She had signed that document 3 times, once for each job, using slightly different names on each one. Marina Reyes, Marina R. Flores, Marina del Carmen Reyes Flores. In a hotel with more than 300 employees and 3 different shifts, no one had connected the dots. Until now. "I can explain," Marina began, though she had no idea how to do so without revealing the complete truth. Carlos raised a hand. "Look, I understand you need the money. We all need it. But this directly violates your employment contract. Not in one, but in 3 different departments. I could fire you from all 3 jobs right now. Please, the word left Marina's lips like a broken whisper. Please don't do that. I just need a little more time. Time for what? Marina, you've been working like a maniac for 11 months. Rosa showed me your medical records. You have 4 visits for exhaustion in the last 2 months. This isn't sustainable. Marina clenched her fists until her knuckles turned white. Pride, that sweet poison that had kept her standing when everything else was crumbling, screamed at her not to say anything, not to show weakness, not to ask for compassion. But the image of Daniel, her 12-year-old son with those big sad eyes asking her when his legs would stop hurting, was stronger than any pride. My son needs surgery, she finally said, each word costing her a piece of her dignity. Specialized surgery that public insurance doesn't cover. It costs 85,000 pesos, and he needs it in less than 3 months, or the damage to his spine will be permanent. Carlos blinked, clearly not expecting that answer. Rosa brought a hand to her chest. Dear God, child, why didn't you say anything? Because asking for help doesn't change the bank account, Marina responded, with a voice that trembled between rage and exhaustion. Because compassionate words don't pay surgeons. Because I've learned that the only person I can trust to save my son is myself. The silence that followed was interrupted by a soft knock on the door. Everyone turned expecting to see another employee, or perhaps a supervisor. Instead, in the doorway stood Sebastian Montero, hands in the pockets of his tailored suit, and an expression of carefully neutral curiosity. Excuse the interruption, he said with that educated voice that comes from generations of privilege. I came to verify the health status of the young lady who collapsed during the event. Is everything under control? Carlos immediately straightened, his posture changing to that of an employee before the owner of the empire that signed his checks. Mr. Montero, yes, everything is under control. Miss Reyes just needs to rest. Sebastian nodded slowly, but his eyes, of a brown so dark they seemed black under the fluorescent light, remained fixed on Marina. She held his gaze out of pure survival instinct, refusing to be the first to look away. In that moment, without words, something was established between them, the recognition that both were people who didn't bend easily. I'm glad to hear it. Rosa, make sure she has something to eat before she leaves, and Carlos, can we talk for a moment in private? The 2 men left, leaving Marina alone with the nurse, who immediately pulled a granola bar from her desk. Eat this, and listen to me well, girl. Pride can keep you standing, but it can also bury you. Sometimes accepting an extended hand isn't weakness, it's survival strategy. Marina took the granola bar but didn't open it. Her thoughts were in the hallway, where the richest man in the building was having a conversation about her employment fate with a manager who had all the power to destroy the 3 jobs keeping her afloat. At 4 in the morning the next day, Marina's alarm sounded with its relentless alarm. She turned it off before the 2nd ring, a reflex developed after 11 months of terror about waking Daniel with the noise. She remained motionless for 30 seconds, letting her body inventory the damage. Pain in her lower back, cramps in her calves, a dull headache behind her eyes that never quite went away. The room she shared with Daniel was small but relentlessly organized. A single bed against the left wall, a bunk bed against the right, a small dresser that served as a divider, a folding desk where Daniel did his homework. Nothing on the walls except a calendar marked with red X's, each X representing 1 day closer to the surgery deadline. 73 days remaining, 42,000 pesos saved, 43,000 to go. Marina got up, feeling every muscle protest, and walked barefoot to the shared bathroom of the small apartment building where they lived. The shower water came out cold, as always at that hour, but she was grateful for the shock that woke her completely. She dressed in her first uniform of the day, black pants, white shirt, navy apron with the Emperor Hotel logo embroidered in golden thread. In the kitchen, she prepared Daniel's breakfast, scrambled eggs with tortilla, a banana, a glass of milk. She left it covered in the microwave with a note. Good morning, my love. Heat for 1 minute. I love you more than yesterday, less than tomorrow. Mum. It was the same note she wrote every day with slight variations, a tradition that had begun when Daniel was 6 and she worked night shifts as a supermarket cashier. Now that he was 12 and she worked practically all hours of the day, those notes were sometimes the only real communication they had. She left the apartment at 4:45. The streets were dark and silent, illuminated only by streetlights that flickered with inconsistent electricity. Marina walked quickly, always looking over her shoulder. This neighborhood wasn't the worst in the city, but it also wasn't safe enough to let your guard down in the pre-dawn darkness. The Emperor Hotel rose like a beacon of civilization in the middle of the financial district, 40 floors of glass and steel that reflected the first lights of dawn. Marina entered through the service door in the back, showing her identification to the security guard, an older man named Esteban, who always greeted her with an courage warrior that she appreciated more than she could express. The hotel's breakfast buffet area was a military operation. At 5:30 in the morning, the kitchen crew was already in motion, cooks preparing made-to-order omelettes, bakers pulling out freshly baked croissants, Marina and 3 other waiters organizing stations for fruits, juices, cereals, and dairy products. Her direct supervisor on this shift was Antonio Ruiz, a 60-year-old man who had worked in hotels his entire life and treated the breakfast buffet as if it were gallery art. Everything had to be perfectly aligned, each tray positioned at the correct angle, each napkin folded with geometric precision. "Good morning, Marina," he greeted without looking up from the coffee cups he was organizing. "I heard you had a small incident last night." "I'm fine, Antonio. It was just a misunderstanding with a meal that didn't agree with me." Antonio finally looked at her, and his expression was more perceptive than Marina would have liked. That misunderstanding left you looking like you fought a train and lost. Did you eat anything this morning?" "I'll eat something on my break." "You don't have a break. Your shift is 6 to 9 without stops. Eat something now, or I'll pull you from the floor." It was an order disguised as concern. Marina took a whole wheat roll and a banana from the kitchen, eating mechanically while organizing coffee cups. The dining room began filling at 6:30 with hotel guests, executives on business trips, reading financial newspapers, package tourists taking photos of everything, families with children running between tables. Marina moved among them like an efficient ghost, refilling coffee cups, replacing empty trays, cleaning spills with smiles that didn't reach her eyes. She was good at this, at being invisible while omnipresent, at anticipating needs before guests knew they had them. It was a type of intelligence not taught in universities, but forged in the trenches of the service economy. At 9 o'clock sharp, her shift ended. Marina changed in the staff locker room, trading the blue apron for a grey polo and cleaning pants, and went up to the 15th floor, where her second job of the day began. The cleaning crew was small but effective, 6 people responsible for 32 rooms in the executive wing. Maria Elena, the supervisor, was a 50-year-old Colombian woman who had raised 5 children while cleaning hotels in 3 different countries. She understood the urgency that drove Marina because she had lived her own version of it. "You look terrible, Misha," said Maria Elena, while distributing room assignments. "How much did you sleep last night?" "Enough." "That's not a number. Numbers don't lie, people do. 4 hours, I slept 4 hours. Maria Elena sighed but didn't argue. In this world, judging another person's survival decisions was a luxury no one could afford. Marina received her cleaning cart, loaded with fresh sheets, towels, cleaning products, and hotel amenities, and started with room 1507. The process was the same in each room. Remove used bedding, clean the bathroom from top to bottom, vacuum the carpet, dust all surfaces, make the bed with hospital corners, replenish amenities, verify everything was perfect before moving to the next. Each room took between 25 and 30 minutes depending on the level of mess. In executive rooms, guests tended to be more orderly, their suitcases perfectly organized, their toiletries carefully aligned. But occasionally she found rooms that looked like they had been hit by a hurricane, clothes everywhere, wet towels on the floor, half-eaten food on tables. It was in room 1523, a junior suite costing $400 per night, where Marina found the first tip of the day, 50 pesos left on the nightstand with a note. Thank you for your excellent service. 50 pesos. Less than a decent meal cost, but more than most guests left. Marina kept the money in her uniform pocket, feeling simultaneously grateful and resentful of that performative gratitude that the rich showed, while sleeping in beds that cost more than her monthly rent. At 1 in the afternoon, her body began trembling again. The roll and banana from the morning had long since converted to consumed energy. Maria Elena found her sitting in the service hallway, head between her knees, breathing deeply. "Rice and beans," said Maria Elena, pushing a Tupperware into Marina's hands. "Don't argue with me. I don't have patience for stupid pride today." Marina ate the rice and beans in 5 minutes, directly from the plastic container, without really tasting anything. It was fuel, not food. Function, not pleasure. The cleaning shift ended at 3. That gave her exactly 30 minutes to get home, verify Daniel was okay with Doña Mercedes, the neighbor from the next apartment who cared for her son for love and ripe plantains, and return to the hotel for the banquet shift that began at 4. Except today, when Marina went down to the staff lobby to exit through the back door, she found Carlos Mendoza waiting for her with an expression that churned her stomach. "Marina, I need you to come to my office. Mr. Montero wants to speak with you." Sebastian Montero's office was on the 35th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city that seemed specifically designed to remind people how small they were compared to his empire. The furnishings were minimalist but clearly expensive. Mahogany desk, Italian leather chairs, shelves filled with books about hotel administration and business development. Sebastian stood in front of the window, hands in his pockets looking at the city. He didn't turn when Carlos and Marina entered. "Thank you, Carlos. You may leave us." Carlos hesitated for a second, clearly uncomfortable leaving an employee alone with the owner, but obeyed. The door closed with a soft click that resonated like a prison lock. Marina waited, refusing to be the first to speak. If she was going to be fired, at least she would maintain her dignity until the end. Sebastian finally turned, and his expression was impossible to read. "Miss Reyes, do you have any idea how many labor violations you're currently committing?" 3, Marina responded without blinking. "1 for each job I maintain simultaneously against company policies." The corner of Sebastian's mouth twisted into something that could have been a smile or a grimace. "I like that you're direct. It makes this conversation easier. Carlos informed me about your son's situation. Progressive scoliosis, correct?" Marina felt the hair on her neck stand up. Automatic defensiveness surged like a reflex. "My personal situation shouldn't be relevant to this discussion. If you're going to fire me, do it. I don't need an HR talk first." "I'm not going to fire you." The silence that followed was dense, loaded with disbelief. "Excuse me?" Sebastian walked to his desk, pulled out a manila folder and placed it in front of Marina. "I'm going to offer you something better, a consolidated position as supervisor of the night shift for banquets and events. Salary of 23,000 pesos monthly plus tips. Complete medical insurance, including an extended family coverage plan, and hours from 6 in the evening to 2 in the morning, 6 days a week. 1 job, dignified conditions, real benefits." Marina looked at the folder as if it were a poisonous snake. "Why? Excuse me? Why would you do that? You don't even know me. You have no reason to help me." Sebastian leaned against his desk, crossing his arms. "You're right, I don't know you, but last night I observed something interesting when you collapsed. Do you know what it was? While you were unconscious on the floor, your body instinctively turned to the left, moving your purse out of reach of anyone who might pass by. Even unconscious, your first instinct was to protect the little you have. That tells me more about your character than any resume." Marina felt something break in her chest, a small crack in the armor she had built during 11 months. "I can't accept charity." "It's not charity, it's a legitimate job offer. The hotel has been looking for a qualified night supervisor for months. Carlos showed me your performance evaluations in the 3 departments where you work. All are outstanding. You're punctual, efficient, and apparently have the ability to be in 3 places at once. Those are exactly the qualities we need." It was a beautiful lie, crafted with enough details to sound believable. But Marina had learned to detect lies. It was a survival skill when you've navigated the world of poverty, where promises are cheap and actions are expensive. If I accept this, what do you want in return? The question hung in the air like smoke. Sebastian looked at her directly, and for the first time, Marina saw something in his eyes that seemed almost like respect. Nothing beyond doing your job well. And perhaps someday, when your son is healthy and you're not operating on 4 hours of sleep, you can remember that not all extended hands come with strings attached. Marina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 11 months pressing against her chest. Every instinct screamed at her not to trust this, that there was a trap hidden somewhere in that contract. But when she opened her eyes and looked at the deadline marked in red in her mind, 73 days to get 43,000 pesos, she knew she had no real choice. When do I start? Tomorrow. Take today off. Rest. Spend time with your son. Marina took the folder with slightly trembling hands. Thank you, she said, and the word came out strangled as if she had to rip it from her throat. As she left the office, feeling Sebastian Montero's eyes on her back, Marina realized something disturbing. For the first time in almost a year, someone had looked at her situation and instead of offering empty compassion or useless advice, had built a real solution. Daniel Reyes was 12 years old, but his eyes carried the weight of someone much older. He was sitting on the bed when Marina arrived home at 4 in the afternoon, 3 hours earlier than usual, and his expression was immediate alarm. What happened? Were you fired? Marina set her bag on the dresser and sat next to him, feeling how her spine protested after 9 hours of continuous work. No, my love. On the contrary, something good happened. Daniel looked at her with skepticism, an expression no 12-year-old should have perfected. What kind of good? The kind of good that means we're going to have to move again? Or the kind of good that means you're going to work even more hours? Marina felt a stab in her chest. When had her son learned to translate good as complicated? The kind of good that means I'm going to work one job. Better hours, better pay, real medical insurance, and, she took a deep breath, and possibly a way to get the money for your surgery faster. Daniel's eyes lit up for a second before caution returned. How? What did you have to do? Just accept an honest job from an honest boss. Bosses aren't honest, Mum. I learned that watching you. Marina ran a hand through her son's hair, noticing how he had grown in recent months while she was too busy to pay attention. You're right to be skeptical. I am too. But sometimes you have to take calculated risks, and this one has more advantages than disadvantages. Daniel nodded slowly, then pulled something from under his pillow, a ceramic piggy bank shaped like a pig, painted in bright colors, but with a crack on one side that had been fixed with tape. Then this is for you, he said, extending it toward Marina with slightly trembling hands. Marina felt a lump form in her throat. Daniel, no, that's your money. It's our money. I want to help too. My love, you already help just by existing, just by being my reason to keep going. But that doesn't pay surgeons, right? Daniel's voice broke. I heard what you told Doña Mercedes last week. You said you were halfway there and time was running out. I don't want you to work so hard that you get sick. I'd rather keep my legs like this than lose you. Marina opened the piggy bank with trembling hands. Inside were coins of different denominations, 5 pesos, 10 pesos, 20 pesos, along with some carefully folded 50 and 100 bills. She counted quickly. 4,300 pesos. Daniel, where did you get all this? The boy looked down, embarrassed. I make bracelets and keychains at school during recess, and some people buy them. Teacher Claudia bought 3 keychains for her nephews. The principal bought a bracelet for his wife. And I just saved all the money to help you. Marina hugged her son so tight she heard his small gasp, but she couldn't let go. The tears she had been holding back for 11 months finally found their escape, falling onto Daniel's hair in silence. Later that night, after Daniel fell asleep, Marina sat at the small kitchen table with the contract Sebastian Montero had given her. She read it line by line, looking for hidden traps, clauses that would turn this gift into a debt. The door to the next apartment opened and closed softly. Familiar footsteps approached. Doña Mercedes, with her characteristic walk of someone who has walked too much for too many years. She knocked 3 times on Marina's door, their private code, and entered without waiting for a response. It was a privilege only Mercedes had, earned through 2 years of caring for Daniel as if he were her own grandson. Doña Mercedes was a 73-year-old woman with silver hair she always wore in a perfectly structured bun. She had emigrated from Guatemala 40 years ago, had raised 4 children alone after her husband died in a construction accident, and had buried 2 of those children due to gang violence and drug overdoses. Her face was marked with the topographic map of trauma, but her eyes still shone with a warmth Marina found almost painful to contemplate. "For you didn't sleep," was the first thing Mercedes said, placing a small pot on the stove. "I couldn't. I was reading this contract." "Did you find anything wrong?" "That's what worries me. I don't find anything wrong. It seems legitimate." Mercedes laughed while serving chicken soup into 2 bowls. "Mija, the problem with people who have been hurt many times is they start to distrust real kindness as much as lies. Sometimes a gift is just a gift. Rich people don't give gifts without reason. They always want something in return. Maybe, or maybe this rich man is different, or maybe—" Mercedes looked at her with those perceptive eyes that seemed to see through walls. "He also knows pain and recognizes it in others." Marina took the bowl of soup, feeling the warmth against her palms. "Did I tell you there was a nurse at the hospital when Daniel had his last evaluation? A young woman, no more than 30 years old. She attended to us with such care, as if Daniel were her own son. And when we left, I heard her cry in the bathroom. I don't know why, but I heard her sob as if her heart was breaking. And what does that have to do with your new boss? That sometimes kindness isn't calculated. Sometimes it's just impulsive compassion, like when someone sees pain and acts because they can't not do so." Mercedes nodded approvingly. "Exactly. Now eat your soup before it gets cold, and stop looking for problems where maybe there aren't any." They spent the rest of the night in silent company, the kind of peace that only comes from years of mutual understanding. Mercedes told her about her sister, the nurse who worked at the hospital where Daniel was going to have surgery, and how she had mentioned there was a new financial assistance program for pediatric surgeries that could help. "Esperanza, my sister, says the program started just 3 months ago. It's funded by a private foundation, something about corporate social responsibility. If you fill out the application, they could cover up to 50% of the cost." Marina felt her heart race. 50%? Mercedes, that would change everything. "I'm going to ask her for the forms, but you need documents, proof of income, medical reports, a letter explaining the situation. Can you get all that?" "I can get whatever is necessary," said Marina, and for the first time in months she felt something that looked dangerously like hope. Marina's first shift as night shift supervisor was like learning a new language. Same walls, same hotel, but a completely different perspective. She was no longer invisible. Now she was responsible for coordinating a team of 15 people between waiters, bartenders, and kitchen staff for corporate events that could have from 50 to 500 guests. Her uniform also changed. Tailored black blazer with the hotel logo embroidered on the pocket, impeccable white shirt, dress pants pressed with military precision. She had bought new shoes with the advance from her first salary, black loafers with cushioned soles that made walking feel like floating after months of worn shoes. The team received her with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Some had seen her working as a waitress and now looked at her with barely disguised resentment. Others seemed willing to give her a chance. And then there was Patricia Salazar, a 45-year-old woman who had been in line for that promotion before Marina appeared out of nowhere. "So you're the new boss," said Patricia during the pre-event briefing, her tone walking the fine line between professional and sarcastic. "I heard you collapsed in front of half the hotel. Such impressive credentials." Marina held her gaze without blinking. "And I heard you've been in this position for 15 years doing the same work, without seeking growth. Impressive in its own right." The silence that followed was tense. Some of the waiters exchanged uncomfortable glances, but Patricia surprised everyone with a harsh laugh. "Well, at least you have a backbone. Let's see if you also have brains. We have a 300-guest event in 2 hours. Product launch for a pharmaceutical company. 4-course menu, food allergies everywhere, and a CEO known for firing people if his steak isn't exactly medium rare. It was a test, and Marina knew it. She spent the next 2 hours reviewing every detail, checked dietary preferences of each guest, coordinated with the kitchen to have alternative options prepared, created a color-coded labeling system so waiters knew which dish to serve to whom without constantly asking. When guests began arriving, Marina was everywhere at once, solving a lighting crisis, replacing a bartender who arrived late, rearranging floral arrangements that didn't meet client specifications. Sebastian Montero arrived mid-event, as he always did for important clients. Marina saw him from across the room, impeccable in a navy suit, conversing with the pharmaceutical CEO as if they were old friends. He saw her too, and for a second their eyes met across the 300 people filling the space. There was no smile, no greeting, just a small nod, acknowledgement that she was doing her job. The event ended without incidents. The pharmaceutical CEO personally congratulated Marina for the smoothest coordination I've seen in years. Patricia Salazar, to her credit, approached at the end of the night while the team cleaned. "Not bad, new boss. Maybe you have a future in this after all." It was as close to a compliment as Marina would probably receive, and she accepted it with a silent nod. At 2 in the morning, when the last guest left and the team finished cleaning, Marina could finally breathe. Her body still ached. 8 hours standing wasn't so different from 18 hours divided into 3 jobs, but there was a crucial difference. This was sustainable. This was something she could do without killing herself in the process. She was reviewing event evaluation sheets when she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and found Sebastian, with his tie loosened and sleeves rolled up, signs that he had been working as hard as she had. "Good work tonight," he said simply. "I just did what anyone would have done." "No, you didn't. You handled 3 simultaneous crises without any guest noticing something was wrong. That's skill, not luck." Marina felt her automatic defensiveness surge. "Why do you keep doing this?" "Doing what?" "Being kind, being attentive. We're not from the same world. You have no reason to care whether I do my job well or badly beyond performance metrics." Sebastian leaned against the wall, and for the first time Marina saw something in his expression that seemed genuinely vulnerable. "Want to know the truth? My mother almost died when I was 11. Pancreatic cancer. Doctors said she needed experimental treatment that cost a fortune, more than my family had available liquid. My father liquidated everything, stocks, properties, jewelry. He sold it all in 3 weeks to pay for that treatment." Marina blinked, genuinely surprised by the confession. "She survived, and my father spent the next 5 years rebuilding the family empire. But I never forgot those 3 months where I didn't know if my mother would live or die. And when I saw you collapse, when Carlos told me about your son, I saw my own childhood reflected in your situation. So yes, I'm attentive, because I viscerally understand what it means to race against the clock to save someone you love." The silence that followed was heavy, loaded with unspoken truths. I'm sorry, I didn't know." "There's no reason you should know, but now you do. And I want you to understand this isn't charity, Marina. This is, let's call it, paying forward what others did for my family when we needed it." Marina nodded slowly, feeling how something changed in her perception of this man. Sebastian wasn't just another rich person playing savior. He was someone who had seen the face of desperation and remembered it well enough to recognize it in others. "The Medical Assistance Foundation," said Marina suddenly. "The one that started 3 months ago, the one that could help with Daniel's surgery. Was it you who created it?" Sebastian's expression didn't change, but the silence was answer enough. "I can't confirm or deny details of anonymous philanthropic foundations, but if such a program existed, and if your son qualified, it would be based completely on merit and need, not favoritism." Marina didn't know whether to laugh or cry. So instead, she did something she hadn't done in almost a year. She allowed a genuine smile to cross her face. "You're the worst liar I've ever met, or the most honest. I still haven't decided which." "I'll take that as a compliment. Now go home, Marina. Your son is probably awake waiting for you." I doubt it. It's midnight. He'll be asleep. I'll bet 500 pesos he's awake. Kids always wait for their parents when they know they've had an important day. Marina shook her head, but when she arrived home at 2:30, she found Daniel sitting on his bed, eyes heavy, but completely awake. "How did it go?" he asked immediately. "It went well, my love. Now sleep." "Was the boss nice to you?" Marina thought about Sebastian Montero, that enigma of privilege and empathy, and nodded. "Yes, Daniel, he was kind." And as she lay down that night, Marina realized something disturbing. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't completely alone in her battle. The next 6 weeks passed at a pace Marina could barely believe. For the first time in almost a year, she had a routine that didn't destroy her. Wake up at 8 in the morning, have breakfast with Daniel, take him to school, have 4 free hours to run errands or simply rest. Pick Daniel up from school, spend 2 hours with him doing homework and having dinner, then go to the hotel for her shift from 6 in the evening to 2 in the morning. It wasn't perfect. She still worked 8 hours daily, 6 days a week. But compared to the 18 hours she had been doing, it felt like a vacation. The medical insurance that came with the new job was comprehensive. Daniel had his first appointment with the specialist at the private hospital, not the public clinic with crowded waiting rooms and 4-month appointments, and the doctor confirmed the surgery was necessary but completely viable. The date was scheduled for 7 weeks out. Total cost, 85,000 pesos. With Marina's savings from 11 months of triple work, 46,000 pesos. With Daniel's 4,300, 50,300. With possible coverage from the Foundation's assistance program, up to 50%. The math for the first time was starting to work in her favor, but with hope also came paranoia. Marina found herself awake at 3 in the morning, mentally calculating the numbers over and over, looking for the hidden trap. What if the Foundation rejected her application? What if there was some hidden cost the doctors didn't mention? What if Sebastian decided to fire her and all this disappeared like smoke? It was during one of these anxiety-induced insomnia episodes that Marina began doing something she had never done before, investigating Sebastian Montero. Using the computer at the public library, because she couldn't afford internet at home, Marina searched for information about him. She found profiles in business magazines, articles about expansion of the Montero hotel empire, photographs from charity events where Sebastian appeared with his family. And then she found something that made her stop, an article from 5 years ago about the death of Sebastian's mother. Maria Teresa Montero had died from a cancer recurrence, and the article mentioned that the family had created a foundation in her honor dedicated to providing access to quality medical treatment for families with limited resources. The Maria Teresa Montero Foundation. The same foundation that supposedly had started 3 months ago offering assistance for pediatric surgeries. Sebastian hadn't lied about his mother's story, but he had omitted a crucial detail. She hadn't survived. The experimental treatment that had temporarily saved her life only gave her 10 more years before the cancer returned more aggressively. Marina closed the computer session, feeling a strange mixture of guilt and understanding. Sebastian intimately knew both victory and defeat in the battle against diseases. He knew what it was to win precious time with someone you love, and he knew what it was to lose them anyway. That night, during her shift at the hotel, Marina saw Sebastian differently. He arrived to supervise a gala event, 500 guests, live music, charity auction. He was in his element, navigating conversations with practiced ease, smiling with that smile that was perfect but never reached his eyes. Marina watched him from across the room as he conversed with a group of businessmen, and for the first time noticed the small signs of exhaustion, the way he rubbed his left temple when he thought no one was looking, how his shoulders tensed when someone mentioned his family, the way his eyes drifted toward the portrait of an elegant woman hanging in the hotel lobby, probably his mother. Midway through the event, an incident threatened to derail everything. One of the new waiters, a 19-year-old named Roberto, accidentally spilled red wine on the white silk dress of one of the most important guests, the wife of a senator who was considering investing in Sebastian's next hotel project. The woman screamed loud enough for half the room to turn. Roberto froze, face pale as paper, The situation could have escalated into a complete disaster: lawsuits, negative publicity, lost contracts. Marina acted in 2 seconds. She approached with a napkin and a bottle of mineral water, beginning the emergency cleaning process while keeping her voice calm and professional. "Mrs. Gutierrez, I deeply apologize for this incident. Allow me to take you to the private room where we have an emergency stain kit. I guarantee the dress will be like new, and if it's not possible, the hotel will cover the full replacement cost plus appropriate compensation for the inconvenience." The woman, who was preparing for a full verbal assault, deflated slightly at the quick and professional response. "This dress costs $6,000. It's not something that can simply be replaced." "Completely understandable. Please, come with me." Marina escorted the woman out of the room, leaving precise instructions to Patricia to handle the rest of the event. In the private room, she used cleaning techniques she had learned during her months working in room cleaning: mineral water with salt, gentle circular movements, infinite patience. 25 minutes later, the stain was almost completely eliminated. Not perfect, but significantly better. Mrs. Gutierrez, now calmed and slightly embarrassed by her initial reaction, accepted a $1,000 voucher for hotel spa services as compensation. Crisis averted. When Marina returned to the room, she found Sebastian waiting for her in the service corridor. "That was impressive. Where did you learn crisis management like that?" 11 months managing 3 simultaneous jobs is basically a master's in disaster management," Marina responded, feeling the exhaustion of the adrenaline beginning to hit her. Sebastian laughed, a genuine laugh that completely transformed his face, removing years of tension and revealing the man beneath the businessman. "Touché. Hey, the event ends in an hour. Do you have time after to grab coffee? There's something I'd like to talk to you about." Marina's immediate alarm activated. "Is it about my work?" "No, it's nothing bad, just a conversation outside the hotel context, like 2 normal people." Marina hesitated. Every instinct developed during years of survival screamed at her to keep boundaries clear, not to mix professional with personal, to remember the difference between her world and his. But another part of her, the part that had begun to loosen after weeks of finally having space to breathe, was curious. "Okay, but it has to be cheap coffee. None of those artisan cafeterias where they charge 100 pesos for an espresso." Sebastian smiled. "I know the perfect place." The perfect place turned out to be a small 24-hour cafe in a neighborhood Marina knew well. The kind of establishment that served night workers, taxi drivers, and people who didn't fit in the bright, pretentious spaces of downtown. The tables were worn formica, the chairs didn't match each other, and the menu was handwritten on a chalkboard that probably hadn't changed in a decade. Marina was surprised. She had expected Sebastian to take her to some trendy place, some establishment where he could be seen doing his good deed of the day. But this place was genuine, unpretentious, the kind of site where food was honest and people didn't pretend to be something they weren't. They sat at a table by the window. It was 3 in the morning, and the streets outside were empty, except for occasional cars passing with headlights cutting through the darkness. Marina ordered black coffee, the cheapest on the menu. Sebastian ordered the same plus a piece of tres leches cake that probably contained more calories than she consumed in an entire day during her months of triple work. "So," Marina began once they had their drinks, "what did you want to talk about?" Sebastian looked at his coffee, seeming unusually uncertain for someone who normally radiated confidence. "You investigated me. I know because our IT security system logs when someone searches for information about company executives using hotel computers." Marina felt her heart race. I'm sorry, I didn't use the hotel computers. I went to the public library." "I know, but Patricia mentioned you'd been asking questions, and it's okay." He raised a hand when he saw Marina was about to defend herself. "I'm not angry. In your position, I would have done the same. When someone offers help that seems too good to be true, the intelligent response is to investigate." Marina took a sip of her coffee, using the time to reorganize her thoughts. "I read about your mother, about the foundation, about everything, and I have to admit, I'm confused." "About what?" "About why someone with your money, your position, your perfect life, would bother helping a complete stranger. Not that I don't appreciate the help. I appreciate it more than I can express. But I need to understand the motivation. Because in my experience, rich people only help when there's something to gain. Sebastian nodded slowly, as if he had been expecting that question. Want the honest truth? The truth I haven't told anyone, not even my family. Yes. I'm fucking lonely, said Sebastian, and the rawness of the admission made Marina blink in surprise. I'm surrounded by people all the time. Employees, business partners, extended family, women who are interested in my last name more than in me. But I'm completely, absolutely alone, because no one in my life understands what it is to struggle. No one knows what real fear is, not fear of losing money or status, but fear of losing the people you love. Marina felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she didn't even know she was carrying. When I saw your collapse, Sebastian continued, I saw something familiar. I saw the desperation I knew when I was 11. And since then, I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Not romantically, he added quickly, or at least not only romantically. It's more complicated than that. It's recognition, like finding someone who speaks your language in a foreign country. Marina processed this for a long moment. So you helped me because you're lonely and bored with your perfect life, and I'm like an interesting charity project that makes you feel good about yourself. No, Sebastian's voice was firm. I helped you because when I looked at you, I saw real strength, not the performative strength of businessmen who brag about their achievements, but the genuine strength of someone who gets up every day and does the impossible because there's no other option. And I needed to remember that kind of strength exists, because after living in my bubble for so long, I started to believe everything is transactional, that everything has a price, that people only act out of self-interest. And I proved you were wrong. No, you proved I was right about you specifically. I don't know if you're representative of humanity in general, but you're evidence that at least some people still have unbreakable integrity. Marina felt something break inside her, a barrier she had carefully built during 11 months of surviving alone. I'm not a saint, Sebastian. I've done things I'm not proud of to survive. I've lied on job applications. I've stolen food from hotel buffets to take home. I've manipulated schedules to work extra hours I technically shouldn't have worked. I'm not the moral hero you seem to think I am. I never thought you were a moral hero. I thought you were a survivor, and survivors do what they have to do. There's no shame in that. The tears Marina had been holding back during the entire conversation finally began to fall. She cried silently, hands wrapped around her coffee cup, feeling the warmth against her palms as everything she had been carrying for almost a year found its escape. Sebastian said nothing. He didn't offer empty comfort, didn't try to fix it. He just pushed his tres leches cake across the table toward her and waited. Marina ate the cake slowly, savoring each bite in a way she hadn't savored food in months. It was sweet and rich and absolutely delicious, and she realized this was the first time in almost a year she ate something just for pleasure, not nutritional necessity. The foundation application, she finally said, her voice hoarse from tears. Daniel qualifies, right? I can't comment on specific applications, but hypothetically, if a 12-year-old with progressive scoliosis and a single working mother in hospitality applied, yes, they would probably qualify for 50% coverage. Marina laughed, a laugh that was half sob. You're terrible at lying when you pretend you're not lying. It's a special talent. Took me years to perfect it. They stayed at the cafe until the sun began to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. They talked about everything and nothing, about Sebastian's hopes to expand the hotel empire toward more sustainable practices, about Marina's dreams of eventually going back to college and studying hotel administration properly, about Daniel's passion for art and how he drew elaborate scenes of fantasy worlds where everyone had enough to eat and no one was alone. When they finally left the cafe, the world felt different. The air was fresher, the colors brighter, or maybe Marina was simply allowing herself to notice these things for the first time in a long time. Can I confess something? Sebastian asked as they walked to where their cars were parked, or rather, to where his car was parked and Marina's bus stop. Sure. When I decided to create the night supervisor position, there was no real selection process. You were the only candidate from the beginning. I fabricated the entire interview process to make it seem legitimate, but the truth is, I created that job specifically for you." Marina stopped dead. "Are you telling me you completely invented a job position just to justify helping me?" "Basically, yes. That's corporate manipulation in its purest form." "I know. Are you angry?" Marina thought about this carefully. She should be angry. She should feel manipulated, treated like a charity project. But all she felt was overwhelming gratitude, mixed with something warmer, more complicated. "No," she finally said. "I'm not angry. I'm overwhelmed and confused and scared because I don't know what all this means or what you expect in return." "I don't expect anything in return, but—" Sebastian hesitated, and for the first time since Marina had known him, he seemed vulnerable. "But I'd like us to be friends, real friends. Not boss and employee, not benefactor and beneficiary. Just two people who understand each other in a way other people can't." Marina extended her hand. "Friends, then, but with one condition." Sebastian took her hand, and Marina noticed how his palms were soft, hands that had never worked in cleaning, that had never been cracked by industrial detergents. "What condition? If you ever feel this is too much, if you ever regret helping me, tell me directly. I don't need protection or white lies. I need honesty. Can you give me that?" "I can give you that," Sebastian responded, and squeezed her hand once before releasing it. "And in return, I need you to promise you'll tell me if you ever need anything." "Not money," he clarified when he saw Marina was about to protest, "but advice or help navigating hospital bureaucracy, or just someone to talk to when things get difficult." "That I can do." As Marina took the bus back home, watching the financial district fade into her neighborhood, how glass buildings gave way to cracked concrete structures, how streets became noisier and more chaotic, for the first time that transition didn't feel like returning to a prison. It felt like going home knowing she had an ally, someone who understood the invisible battles she fought every day. And when she arrived at her apartment and found Daniel awake, drawing in his notebook with colored pencils that Doña Mercedes had given him, Marina allowed herself to feel something dangerous. She allowed herself to feel hope. "Mom, are you crying?" Daniel asked, looking at her with those big eyes that saw too much. "Yes, my love, but they're good tears this time." "Is there such a thing as good tears?" Marina sat next to her son, putting an arm around his shoulders. "Yes, good tears are the ones you cry when you finally allow another person to help you carry your weight, and when you realize that maybe, just maybe, everything is going to be okay." Daniel snuggled against her, and together they watched the dawn complete its transformation from the small window of their apartment, knowing that in exactly 6 weeks and 3 days, Daniel would have his surgery, that the money would be there, that the help was real, and that sometimes, just sometimes, happy endings exist even for people who never thought they deserved them. 3 weeks before Daniel's surgery, when Marina was finally beginning to believe things might work out, the past came knocking at her door. Literally. It was a Saturday afternoon, her only day off of the week, and Marina was in the kitchen preparing chicken and rice for dinner, while Daniel did homework at the table. The knock on the door was soft but insistent. 3 knocks, pause, 3 more knocks. Marina opened the door and felt the world stop. Fernando Reyes, Daniel's father. The man who had disappeared 6 years ago when the doctor diagnosed Daniel's scoliosis and mentioned he would eventually need expensive surgery. The man who had packed his things one night while she slept and left a 3-line note. "I can't do this, I'm not strong enough, I'm sorry." He looked different. Older, obviously. Everyone aged, but also more polished. Casual but clearly expensive suit, polished shoes, a watch that probably cost more than 3 months of his old salary. His hair was professionally cut, with greys strategically integrated that gave him a distinguished air. "Hello, Marina," he said, as if they had talked yesterday instead of 6 years ago. Marina felt every muscle in her body tense. "What are you doing here?" "I came to see my son." The laugh that came from Marina was harsh, almost cruel. Your son. How interesting. The same son you abandoned 6 years ago. The same child whose nights of pain you spent zero consoling. The same... Marina, please. I know I made mistakes. Big mistakes. But I've changed. I'm in therapy. I have a good job now. And I need to know Daniel. Be part of his life. Before Marina could respond, Daniel appeared behind her. Mum? Who is it? The silence that followed was so dense Marina could hear her own heart beating in her ears. Fernando looked at his son, at this 12-year-old who was a perfect mix of both. Marina's eyes, Fernando's facial structure, something completely unique in the way he held his body despite the pain. Hello, Daniel. I'm your father. Marina saw how Daniel's face went through a dozen emotions in 5 seconds. Confusion, recognition, anger, curiosity, fear. Finally, it settled on something that looked like defensive caution. I thought you were dead. Fernando blinked, clearly not expecting that response. Why would you think that? Because Mom never talks about you, and when I asked once years ago, she said you had disappeared. Adults only say disappeared when they mean dead, but don't want to scare you. Marina felt her heart break. She had tried to protect Daniel from the brutal truth, that his father had chosen to leave, that he had prioritized his comfort over his responsibility, but in the process had created a narrative that might have been worse. I'm not dead, Fernando said softly, but I understand why you'd think that. Daniel, can we talk? The 3 of us, just for a few minutes. Every cell of Marina's being screamed to close the door in Fernando's face and protect Daniel from this new complication. But when she looked at her son and saw the genuine curiosity in his eyes, that basic human need to understand where you come from, she knew she had no right to deny that. 5 minutes, she finally said, and if Daniel asks you to leave at any point, you leave. No discussion. Fernando nodded gratefully and entered the small apartment. His eyes scanned the space, noticing the single bed against one wall, the bunk bed against the other, the meticulous organization born from the need to maximize limited space. Marina saw his expression change slightly, something that could have been guilt or shame or both. They sat around the small kitchen table. Marina turned off the stove, not trusting herself not to accidentally burn down the house while navigating this conversation. Daniel, Fernando began, I know I have a lot to explain, and I don't expect you to forgive me or want to have a relationship with me, but I need you to know that leaving was the most cowardly decision of my life. Your mom is the strongest person I've ever known, and I wasn't up to her level. When doctors said you'd eventually need surgery, that it would be expensive, I panicked. I saw my future disappear. I saw debts and responsibilities and sacrifices I wasn't prepared to make. So you left me with Mom, Daniel said, his voice surprisingly calm. For her to make all the sacrifices alone? Yes. And that's a truth I have to live with every day. Marina watched this interaction with a mixture of emotions she couldn't name. Part of her wanted to defend Fernando, explain that raising a child with special medical needs was terrifying, that not everyone had the necessary strength. Another part wanted to scream at him, ask him what right he had to appear now when all the hard work was already done. Did you come to ask forgiveness? Daniel asked. Or did you come because you feel guilty? Fernando looked at this 12-year-old with something that seemed like respect, both if I'm honest. But I also came because I want to try to be part of your life, if you'll let me. I'm not asking to be called Dad or replace what your mom has built. Just, I want to know you, know who you are. Be present in a way I wasn't before. Daniel looked at Marina, seeking guidance. She held his gaze and said, This is your decision, my love, not mine. I'll respect whatever you choose. Daniel thought for a full minute, an eternity in uncomfortable conversations. You can visit me sometimes, but not now because I'm busy, and you can't just show up. You have to tell Mom first, and if you ever disappear again, don't come back. A second chance is generous. There won't be a third. Marina felt her eyes fill with tears. Her 12-year-old son had just established clearer and healthier boundaries than many adults could articulate. Fernando nodded, clearly impacted by Daniel's maturity. Those are fair terms. I accept them. Thank you, Daniel. After Fernando left, leaving a phone number and a promise to call before the next visit, Marina and Daniel sat in silence for several minutes. "Did I do the right thing?" Daniel finally asked. "There's no right answer in situations like this, but you established boundaries, were honest about your feelings, and gave him a chance without letting him manipulate you. That's incredibly mature, Daniel. I don't trust him." "You don't have to trust him yet. Trust is earned, not automatically given." Daniel nodded, then said something that made Marina freeze. "You know what's weird? He looked successful, like rich, but he didn't offer to help us with money. He didn't even mention the surgery." Marina hadn't thought about that. But Daniel was right. Fernando had arrived dressed like someone who clearly had resources, but hadn't made a single concrete offer of financial help. Just words about change and therapy and second chances. That night Marina couldn't sleep. She lay awake staring at the ceiling, processing Fernando's reappearance and what it might mean for the fragile balance she had built. At 3 in the morning she finally gave up and decided to send Sebastian a message. It was inappropriate, she knew. They were friends, but he was also technically her boss. But he had said she could contact him when things got difficult, and this definitely qualified. The response came 3 minutes later. The 24-hour cafe had become their unofficial place. Marina arrived first, ordering 2 black coffees and requesting the same tres leches cake they had shared last time. When Sebastian arrived, he still wore his work clothes, but with his tie loosened and the 5 o'clock shadow suggesting hours of work without rest. "You look terrible," Marina said as he sat down. "You too," he responded with a smile. "We're a pathetic pair of dysfunctional night owls." Marina told him everything. Fernando's appearance, his look of sudden success, Daniel's mature reaction, her own confusion about what to do with this new variable. Sebastian listened without interrupting, methodically drinking his coffee. "Want my honest opinion?" he asked when she finished. "That's why I called you. Your ex is a coward who's probably going through some midlife crisis and decided that reconnecting with his son sounds better in therapy than admitting he was a complete failure as a father. The fact that he didn't offer concrete financial help while clearly having money tells you everything you need to know about his real intentions." Marina blinked, surprised by the harshness of the assessment. "You don't hold back, do you? You asked for honesty, but," he added quickly, "that doesn't mean Daniel was wrong to give him a chance. Kids need to form their own opinions about their parents. Your job is to protect him from real harm, not from possible disappointment. And it seems Daniel has his head on straight. He established boundaries. That's more than most adults can do." Marina took a bite of the cake, letting the sweetness dissolve on her tongue while processing. "I'm afraid Fernando will disappear again, that Daniel will allow himself to hope for something and then be abandoned a second time. I'm not sure my son can emotionally survive that. Daniel already survived being abandoned once, and look how he turned out. Exceptional. That's thanks to you. Whatever happens with Fernando, Daniel has a mother who taught him resilience, healthy boundaries, and unconditional love. That's his safety net." The words hit Marina with unexpected force. She spent so much time worrying about what she couldn't give Daniel, the present father, the big house, family vacations, that she had forgotten to recognize everything she had given him. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I needed to hear that." Sebastian smiled, but there was something more behind that smile, something nervous. "There's something I need to talk to you about, and I'm not sure how you're going to react." The tone made Marina's stomach contract. "What is it?" "The hotel's administrative board discovered our friendship. I don't know how, but someone saw us leaving this cafe 3 weeks ago and mentioned it to my uncle Ricardo, who's on the board. He confronted me yesterday." Marina felt panic begin to climb up her throat. "And what did he say?" "That my inappropriate relationship with a subordinate employee is creating conflict of interest and exposing the hotel to possible lawsuits for favoritism. Basically, they gave me an ultimatum. End my relationship with you or face a formal review of all my hiring decisions from the last 6 months. Marina felt breathless. "So this is my fault. I ruined your reputation." "No," Sebastian's voice was firm. "This isn't your fault. This is family corporate politics playing with real lives. My uncle never forgave me for expanding the business outside the family's traditional properties. He's been looking for a reason to question my leadership. You're just the convenient excuse. Then let me resign. I leave the job problem solved. Absolutely not. Marina, listen to me. Sebastian leaned forward, his voice intense. I'm not going to let them turn you into collateral damage in their power war. I already made a decision. What decision? I'm going to transfer operational control of the Emperor Hotel to my younger brother, Matteo. He's been waiting for his chance to lead anyway. I'm going to start something new, something I've been considering for years, but never had the courage to actually do. Marina felt the world tilt. What are you talking about? Sebastian pulled a folder from his briefcase, different from the one he had given her when he offered the job, but equally intimidating in its thickness. A social consulting firm for the hospitality industry, helping establishments create genuine corporate responsibility programs, not just superficial public relations. Training programs for employees from low-income backgrounds, subsidies for healthcare, on-site childcare. All the things I saw worked when I implemented them for you, and that made me realize real impact is more satisfying than simply accumulating wealth. Sebastian, you can't destroy your career for me. I'm not doing it for you, I'm doing it for me. You just showed me it was possible. Marina, I've been operating on autopilot for years, doing what was expected of me, following the plan my father laid out before he died. But when I met you, when I saw what you built from literally nothing, I realized I was wasting my life on something I didn't really care about. Tears began falling down Marina's cheeks. What if you fail? What if this new business doesn't work? Then I'll fail doing something I care about. That's better than succeeding at something that makes me feel empty. Marina didn't know what to say. Her entire life had been about survival, pragmatism, making the safest choices even when they were miserable. The idea that someone would voluntarily give up security for purpose was so alien to her experience, she could barely process it. What about my job? If you leave the hotel, will I still have my position? Your position is secure. Matteo respects your work. In fact, he suggested we'd create more supervisor positions after seeing how effective you are. But, Sebastian hesitated, I want to offer you something different. Come work with me at the new company, as operations director. Comparable salary, but with the opportunity to literally change how the hospitality industry works for people like you. Marina stared at him, sure she had heard wrong. Operations director. Sebastian, I didn't even finish college. You don't need a college degree to understand the realities of working in hospitality from the bottom. In fact, I need someone who lived those experiences, someone who can identify real problems and design practical solutions. Consultants with MBAs can make pretty PowerPoint projections. You can tell me if those projections would actually work in the real world. This is crazy. Complete insanity. Maybe. But the alternative is we both continue on trajectories that make us miserable. Me trapped in family corporate politics, you working under a new boss who might not be as understanding. Wouldn't you rather bet on something that could be extraordinary? Marina closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing on her. The safe option was to stay at the hotel, keep her head down, continue slowly building toward a stable future. The risky option was to jump into the unknown with Sebastian, bet on a company that could completely fail, potentially destroy the stability that had cost so much to achieve. I need to think about this, she finally said. I need to talk to Daniel about it. I need time. You have all the time you need. The office stays open. They stayed at the cafe until dawn began seeping through the windows, talking about logistics, contingency plans, worst-case scenarios. Sebastian showed her financial projections, not as much as her hotel salary, but enough to live comfortably. He explained his vision for the company, the contacts he already had in the industry, the hotels that had already expressed interest in consulting. It was ambitious but not impossible, risky but calculated, and as Marina listened, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Excitement. Not the relief of survival, but genuine excitement about possibility. When she got home that morning, she found Daniel awake, drawing in his notebook. On the page was an elaborate sketch of a building, half hotel, half hospital, with gardens intertwining between them. "Here's for your new job," Daniel said without looking up. "Doña Mercedes told me Mr. Montero is going to offer you something new. I drew this to give you luck." Marina sat next to her son, marveled by this child's intuition. "What do you think? Should I take risks or play it safe?" Daniel finally looked up, his eyes so similar to hers, serious and thoughtful. "Mom, you've been playing it safe your entire life, and look where we are, finally safe. Maybe it's time to risk something you actually want, not just something you need." Marina hugged her son, feeling her voice break. "When did you become so wise?" "I learned from the best," Daniel responded, and continued drawing his impossible building where dreams and reality met at perfect architectural angles. The morning of Daniel's surgery dawned grey and cloudy, as if the sky itself shared Marina's anxiety. They had arrived at the hospital at 5 in the morning, 3 hours before the scheduled procedure, because Marina didn't trust traffic and couldn't risk being late. Daniel was surprisingly calm, sitting on the hospital bed in a gown that was too big for his thin body, playing with his phone while they waited. Marina was the complete opposite of calm, compulsively checking documentation for the 10th time, verifying all forms were signed. Payment was processed, that there was no last-minute error that could derail everything. The assistance program from the Maria Teresa Montero Foundation had covered 50%, 42,500 pesos. Marina's savings covered 36,000. Daniel's 4,300 completed the amount, with 500 pesos left over that Marina kept as a good luck talisman. Doña Mercedes arrived at 6:30, with a bag full of homemade food Marina probably couldn't eat, but appreciated anyway. Sebastian arrived at 7, dressed casually in jeans and a sweater, the first time Marina had seen him in anything that wasn't a business suit. He brought a book for Daniel, a graphic novel about impossible architecture. "Thought you'd like this," he said, handing it to Daniel. "It's about a boy who builds cities in his imagination and then finds ways to make them real." Daniel took the book with bright eyes. "Thanks, Mr. Montero." "Just Sebastian is fine. We're friends, right?" "Friends," Daniel nodded, genuinely smiling for the first time that morning. At 7:30, Fernando appeared. Marina hadn't invited him, but she wasn't surprised to see him either. Daniel had mentioned the surgery during one of their weekly phone calls, carefully supervised conversations that had been happening for the past 3 weeks. Fernando looked uncomfortable, like someone who knew he wasn't welcome but felt he had to be there anyway. He brought a bouquet of flowers, too elaborate, too expensive, exactly the kind of performative gesture someone who doesn't know how to show real love would make. "Hi, Daniel. How are you feeling?" "Nervous, but Mom says the doctor is the best, so I guess I'll be okay." Fernando looked at Marina, then at Sebastian, clearly noticing the dynamic, but not fully understanding it. "And you are?" "Sebastian Montero, family friend." The way Sebastian said family friend was possessive in a way that made Marina feel heat creep up her neck. But before she could clarify or correct, Dr. Ramirez entered. Dr. Ramirez was a man in his 50s, with silver hair and a presence that radiated calm competence. He had performed more than 300 scoliosis surgeries, had credentials from international institutions, and had been recommended by 3 different specialists. "Good morning, Reyes family, are you ready?" Daniel nodded, but Marina saw how his hands trembled slightly. "Will it hurt?" "Not during surgery. You'll be completely asleep. Afterward, yes, there will be pain. I'm not going to lie to you, Daniel. But we'll have strong medications to manage it. And in a few months you'll be able to do things that were difficult before. Run without pain. Sit in class without your back screaming. Grow without your spine curving more. Will I be able to draw better? Sometimes my fingers go numb when my back is bad." "You should have less numbness, yes." Daniel looked at Marina. "Then do it. I'm ready." The nurse arrived with the gurney to take him to the operating room. Marina walked alongside her son until they reached where she was allowed, the double doors that said, "Authorized personnel only." Before they took him away, Daniel took her hand. "Mom, if something goes wrong, nothing is going to go wrong. But if it does, I need you to know I don't regret anything. You did everything you could, more than anyone could do, and if I don't wake up—" Tears began falling down Marina's face without permission. "Daniel, please, if I don't wake up, I want you to take that job with Sebastian. I want you to do something that makes you happy, not just something that pays the bills. Promise me." Marina couldn't speak. She just nodded while sobbing, clinging to her son's hand until a nurse gently separated them. The next 5 hours were the longest of Marina's life. She sat in the waiting room, unable to eat, unable to read, barely able to breathe. Mercedes prayed the rosary silently. Fernando nervously looked at his phone. And Sebastian was simply there. He didn't try forced conversation. He didn't offer empty platitudes. He just sat next to Marina, his presence solid, letting her know without words that she wasn't alone. At 12:30, Dr. Ramirez emerged from the operating room, still wearing his surgical cap and stained gown. Marina stood up so fast she got dizzy. "How is he?" "The surgery was successful. Excellent, in fact. We inserted 8 titanium rods and 18 screws to stabilize his spine. The curvature was corrected from 38 degrees to 12. He's in recovery now. He should wake up in the next 2 hours." Marina felt her knees give way. Sebastian caught her before she fell, holding her while she cried against his shoulder, tears of relief so intense she thought they'd never stop. "You can see him in 30 minutes, the doctor continued. "But prepare yourself, Mrs. Reyes, he'll look fragile. He'll be connected to multiple IVs. He'll be pale. He'll probably be disoriented when he wakes up, but all of that is normal." Marina nodded, unable to form words. When they finally took her to the recovery room, Daniel looked so small in that hospital bed. There were tubes coming out of his arms, monitors beeping softly, a massive bandage along his back. But he was breathing. He was alive. He was on his way to healing. Marina sat next to his bed, carefully taking his hand, avoiding the IVs. She whispered to him in Spanish all the things she had wanted to tell him during 11 months, but never found the moment. How proud she was, how strong he was, how much she loved him, how he was her reason for everything. Fernando stayed for 20 minutes before leaving, saying he had a work meeting he couldn't miss. Marina barely noticed him leave. Doña Mercedes stayed until 3 before a nurse insisted only 2 visitors could remain at a time, which left Marina and Sebastian sitting in silence next to Daniel's bed as he slept, his chest rising and falling with the steady rhythm of morphine-assisted breathing. "Thank you," Marina finally said, "for everything. For the foundation you pretended you didn't create, for the job you invented, for being here today when you didn't have to." "You don't have to thank me." "Yes, I do, because you changed our lives. And I know you say it wasn't charity, that it was mutually beneficial or whatever, but the truth is you saved us. And that means everything." Sebastian looked at sleeping Daniel, then back at Marina. "You know what I realized while waiting outside the operating room? That I wasn't here just for you or Daniel. I was here because you became my family, not in the legal or biological sense, but in the sense of, these are the people I show up for. These are the people whose pain I feel as my own. And that's something I haven't had since my mother died." Marina felt something move in her chest, something that had been carefully guarded for 11 months, for 6 years, maybe for her entire adult life. The wall she had built around her heart, designed to protect her from more pain, began developing cracks. "Sebastian, she began, but didn't know how to finish that sentence. She didn't need to, because at that moment, Daniel opened his eyes, disoriented and blinking against the fluorescent lights. "Mum?" His voice was hoarse, rough from the breathing tube they had removed an hour ago. "I'm here, my love, I'm here. Everything went perfectly." Daniel tried to smile, though it was more of a grimace from the pain. "Did you promise? Did you promise you'd take the job?" Marina laughed through her tears. "Yes, I promised. Now sleep, rest." "Good," Daniel murmured, his eyes already closing again. "Because you two are obvious, even I can see it. And I don't even know what it is, but whatever it is, don't ruin it by being stupid." And with that devastating observation from a 12-year-old on morphine, Daniel fell back asleep. Marina and Sebastian looked at each other, both stunned, both processing the words a child had seen more clearly than 2 complicated adults. "Are we obvious?" Marina asked quietly. "Apparently," Sebastian responded, and the way he looked at her as if she were something precious and valuable and impossible made the cracks in Marina's wall turn into complete fractures. 2 weeks after the surgery, Daniel was home recovering. The pain had been brutal during the first days: morphine, then oxycodone, then finally ibuprofen in doses that would make adults cry. But each day was a little better. Each day, Daniel could move a little more, breathe a little deeper, exist without that constant background pain that had been his companion for years. Marina had taken medical leave from the hotel, something Matteo, Sebastian's brother, and now operational director, had approved without hesitation. Sebastian visited every afternoon, bringing books for Daniel, food for Marina, and a presence that had become as essential as oxygen. It was during one of these visits that Mercedes knocked with her characteristic pattern and entered without waiting for a response. But this time she wasn't alone. Behind her was her sister, Esperanza, the nurse who had facilitated Daniel's initial evaluation at the hospital. "We need to talk," Mercedes announced without preamble. "The four of us, as family." Marina blinked, confused. "The four of us? You, me, my sister, and Sebastian. Because if these last months have taught me anything, it's that family isn't just blood. It's who shows up when everything is crumbling." They sat around the small kitchen table, the same table where Marina had read employment contracts and cried from desperation, and celebrated small victories. Esperanza poured coffee she had brought in a thermos, a Guatemalan blend that smelled of earth and promises. "Marina," Esperanza began, her voice soft but firm, "my sister has told me about your situation, the new job Sebastian offered you, and I want to tell you something important. You have to take it." I'm still considering—" "No, you're not. You're being afraid. I know because I did exactly the same thing 15 years ago. I was offered a better position at another hospital, better pay, better schedule, opportunity for specialization, and I rejected it because I was afraid of change, of failing, of discovering I wasn't as good as I thought I could be." "And do you regret it?" Marina asked quietly. "Every day, because fear kept me in a place where I was competent but unhappy, and eventually that unhappiness filtered into everything else in my life." Mercedes nodded vigorously. "I did something similar. When I came to this country, I had the opportunity to move to another city where there were more opportunities, better pay, a larger Guatemalan community. But I was afraid to leave what was familiar, so I stayed. And I lost years I could have used building something better." Marina felt her throat tighten. "But you're both fine now. You built good lives." "We survived," Esperanza corrected. "We built functional lives. But that's not the same as thriving. And you, Misha, have been surviving for so long, you forgot that thriving is an option." Sebastian, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. "Marina, I can explain all the business logistics, show you financial projections, give you guarantees, but none of that matters if you're not ready to believe you deserve something more than just survival. And the truth is, you deserve everything. You deserve a job that challenges you intellectually. You deserve compensation that allows you to live, not just exist. And you deserve to be part of something that's building real solutions, not just managing symptoms of a broken system." "But what if I fail? What if I'm not good enough?" "Then you'll fail," Mercedes said simply, "and you'll get up and try again, like you've done every day of your adult life. The difference is, this time, you won't be alone. You have people backing you up." Daniel, who had been listening from his position on the couch, added his voice. "Mom, you said I was brave for letting Dad back into my life with conditions. That establishing boundaries and risking disappointment was strength. Doesn't the same apply to you?" Marina looked at the faces around that table. Mercedes with her wrinkles of wisdom, Esperanza with her quiet determination, Sebastian with his barely contained hope, Daniel with his impossibly mature perspective. And she realized something fundamental. Her entire life she had operated under the belief she was alone, that it depended only on her, that asking for help was weakness. But that wasn't true. It had never been true. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling but firm. "I'll do it, I'll take the job, but—" She looked directly at Sebastian. "I need something clear. Is this just professional? Or is there something more here that neither of us is willing to name?" The silence that followed was electric. Mercedes and Esperanza exchanged significant looks. Daniel pretended to be intensely interested in his book. Sebastian took a deep breath. It's more. It's been more since the moment I saw you collapse and realized I'd never known anyone who fought so hard for the people they love. It's more every time you speak and say something so honest, it makes me re-examine every belief I had about how the world works. It's more when I'm alone at midnight working, and my first thought is that I want to share something with you. It's love, Marina. Incomplete, complicated, crossing lines of social class and differences of experience. But it's love. Marina felt her vision blur with tears. I don't know how to do this. I've never had a relationship that wasn't built on need or desperation. I don't know how to be with someone when I'm not in constant survival mode. Then you'll learn, Sebastian said simply. We'll learn together, because I don't know how to do this either. I've never had a relationship where the other person actually sees me, not just my money or my last name. We're a combined mess. But maybe that's okay. Daniel looked up from his book. Can we vote on whether to let them become boyfriend and girlfriend? Because technically this affects my life too. The tension in the room broke with laughter. Mercedes lightly hit Daniel on the head with a napkin. Disrespectful child. Adults don't need permission from children. But this adult does, Sebastian said, looking at Daniel seriously. Daniel, I'm not going to pretend to be your father. Fernando has that title, even though he hasn't earned it. But I want to be part of your life. I want to be present for your achievements and failures. I want to be someone you can trust. Are you okay with that? Daniel considered this carefully. Will you teach me things, like how businesses work and how to talk to important people without feeling like an imposter? Absolutely. And you won't disappear if things get difficult with Mom? Never. Then you have my vote. But, Daniel raised a finger, if you hurt my mom, Doña Mercedes has a cousin who knows karate. Just wanted you to know. Mercedes laughed. I don't have a cousin who knows karate, but I have many friends in the Guatemalan community who would be happy to have a serious conversation with anyone who hurts this family. And so around a worn Formica table in a two-bedroom apartment, a family not related by blood, but connected by something stronger, choice, survival, and unconditional love, made decisions that would change their lives. Marina's decision to embark on this new chapter of her life, both professionally with Sebastian and romantically, wasn't universally received with joy. Fernando, whose weekly visits to Daniel had become predictable but superficial, didn't react well when he found out. It was during one of these visits, 3 weeks after the surgery, that things exploded. Daniel was showing Fernando his most recent drawings when he casually mentioned, Sebastian is going to take me to the Architecture Museum next Saturday. He says they have an exhibit about impossible structures. Fernando froze. Sebastian? The same man from the hospital? Yes, he's Mom's boyfriend. Well, technically they haven't made it official yet, but we all know they are. He's nice. He brought pizza last week and taught me about operational costs of hotels. Fernando's expression darkened. Where's your mother? In the kitchen. Fernando stood and walked toward the kitchen where Marina was preparing sandwiches. His arrival was sudden, his body language aggressive. So now you have a boyfriend? A rich man who can give you everything I couldn't? Marina didn't even turn from the counter. It's not your business, Fernando. It's absolutely my business when that man is spending time with my son. My son. How fascinating that you use those words. Daniel is your son when it's convenient for your narrative, but he wasn't your son when he needed his father at 3 a.m. crying from pain. He wasn't your son when I had to work 18 hours a day to pay for the surgery that saved him. He wasn't your son when he wondered if he was so defective his own father couldn't bear to look at him. I didn't abandon him because he was defective. I abandoned him because I was weak. Exactly. You were weak. Daniel was never the problem, you were. Fernando took a step forward, and for a moment Marina thought he might get violent. But then another voice cut through the tension. I think it's time for you to leave, Fernando. Sebastian stood in the doorway, clearly just arriving. He wasn't physically imposing, Fernando was bigger, but there was something in his posture that said he wouldn't tolerate aggression. You have no right to throw me out of here. You're right, but Marina does, and I'm sure if she wanted you to stay, she'd say so. Marina looked between the two men, one representing her past, her trauma, her worst decisions, the other representing possibility, respect, and a future she barely dared imagine. "Fernando, I need you to leave now. This is ridiculous. He's just another rich man buying your affection with money. He's the man who stood by my side during Daniel's 5-hour surgery while you had a business meeting you couldn't miss. He's the man who created a foundation to help families like ours without expecting anything in return. He's the man who sees my strength instead of my desperation. So no, Fernando, it's not the same." Fernando looked at Marina with something that could have been genuine pain or wounded resentment. It was hard to distinguish. "I wanted to be better. I tried." "Trying isn't enough when your son needed action. Calling once a week doesn't cancel 6 years of absence. And showing up now that all the hard work is done doesn't make you a father. It makes you a tourist in your son's life." The word tourist hit like a slap. Fernando stepped back, his face contorted between rage and humiliation. "I'll fight for custody. I have money now. I have stability. I can give Daniel things you never—" "Try that." Marina's voice was steel. "Please try that. Because I love when cowards expose themselves publicly. I have 11 months of records showing I worked triple time to save our son. I have 6 years of complete absence on your part. I have statements from teachers, doctors, and neighbors testifying I was the only person present in Daniel's life. Want to take this to court? Do it. But no, you'll lose more than custody. You'll lose any chance of having a genuine relationship with your son." Fernando opened his mouth, then closed it. After a moment that felt like an eternity, he turned and left, closing the door behind him with a slam that made the entire apartment shake. The silence that followed was absolute. Marina stood in the kitchen, her hands trembling, adrenaline coursing through her system. Sebastian didn't try to hug her or console her immediately. Instead, he asked, "What do you need right now?" The question was so perfect, Marina almost laughed. "A minute. I just need a minute to process that I finally told Fernando exactly what he deserved to hear." "Take all the time you need. I'll be with Daniel if you need me." Sebastian left the kitchen, giving her space. Marina stood staring at her hands, these hands that had carried trays, cleaned toilets, held her son during nights of pain, and now finally had established a boundary with the man who had made them work 18 hours a day. When she returned to the living room, she found Sebastian and Daniel sitting together, looking at the book about impossible architecture. "Mom?" Daniel looked at her with worried eyes. "Is Dad angry?" "Yes, but that's not your problem, my love. Adults sometimes have to have difficult conversations. Is he going to stop visiting me?" Marina sat next to her son, choosing her words carefully. "I don't know. But if he does, that will be his decision, not yours. You're not responsible for your father's choices. You never were." Daniel nodded slowly, processing. "It's okay if he doesn't come back. I want him to come back as a real father, or not come back at all." And there it was, that steel core Daniel had inherited from Marina, the ability to establish boundaries and maintain them even when it hurt. That night, after Daniel fell asleep, Marina and Sebastian sat on the small apartment balcony, barely bigger than a closet, but with a view of the city lights stretching to the horizon. "Do you think I did the right thing?" Marina asked, confronting him like that. "I think you did what was necessary. Fernando has been operating under the illusion he can come and go from Daniel's life without consequences. You showed him there's a cost to his choices. I still feel terrible, like I closed the door on any possibility of reconciliation. Doors are only closed if both parties stop trying to open them. If Fernando really wants to be part of Daniel's life, he'll find a way to demonstrate it with actions, not words. And if he doesn't, that's not your fault either." Marina rested her head on Sebastian's shoulder, feeling the constant weight she had been carrying lighten just a little. "How did you know you should come today?" "Daniel sent me a message. He said Fernando was acting weird, and maybe I should show up." Marina lifted her head, surprised. "Daniel has your number?" "I gave it to him 2 weeks ago. I told him if he ever needed anything, even just to talk, he could contact me. I hope that's okay." Marina felt her eyes fill with tears. "More than okay. It's perfect." And sitting on that tiny balcony under stars that could barely be seen through the city's light pollution, Marina realized something. Love doesn't always come in the packages you expect. Sometimes it comes in the form of a rich man who decided to see beyond class differences. Sometimes it comes in the form of neighbors who become chosen family. Sometimes it comes in the form of a son who is wiser than any adult. And sometimes, just sometimes, the happy ending isn't about getting everything you wanted. It's about recognizing everything you already had. 2 months later, Sebastian officially launched Impact Hospitality, his new social consulting firm. The office was modest compared to the hotel empire he had left behind, a shared office space in a downtown building with 6 employees, including Marina, and a vision that was ambitious but achievable. Marina had spent those 8 weeks in intensive training. Sebastian had hired consultants to teach her advanced Excel, project management, and proposal presentation. She had read more in 2 months than in the last 5 years, absorbing information about labor laws, human resources best practices, and social impact business models. It was brutally difficult. There were nights where Marina cried from frustration, convinced she was a fraud, that she didn't belong in this world of complex spreadsheets and corporate jargon. But each time she considered giving up, she remembered the promise she had made to Daniel in the hospital. Their first client was a medium-sized hotel on the outskirts of the city. 200 rooms, high staff turnover, constant complaints about working conditions. The owner had contacted Sebastian after reading an article about his transition from traditional businessman to social consultant. Marina and Sebastian spent 3 days conducting a complete audit, interviewing employees from housekeeping to management, reviewing salary and benefits records, observing daily operations. And what Marina found was painfully familiar. People working double shifts without appropriate compensation, without access to medical insurance, in environments that prioritized efficiency over human dignity. When it came time to present their findings to the owner, a man named Javier Campos, who had inherited the hotel from his father, Marina felt the old panic. She was about to criticize a rich person in his own boardroom. All her conditioning screamed at her to smile, be compliant, not make waves. But then she looked at the numbers in front of her. She saw the stories behind those numbers. Maria, the cleaning employee with 3 jobs. Roberto, the waiter who slept in his car between shifts. Claudia, the receptionist who brought her 5-year-old daughter to work because she couldn't afford childcare. "Mr. Campos," Marina began, her voice firm though her hands trembled, "your hotel is operating on the backs of desperate people. And before you take offense, I know this because I was one of those people. I worked 3 jobs in a single building, 18 hours a day because there was no other option. And your hotel is structured exactly the same way as that system that almost killed me." Javier Campos tensed, but didn't interrupt. Now the good news is fixing this isn't impossible. In fact, it's economically viable. Our analysis shows that if you increase salaries by 15%, implement basic medical insurance, and restructure shifts to eliminate the need for uncompensated overtime, your operational costs will increase only by 8%. 8% is a lot of money. It's much less than what you're currently losing in staff turnover. Your records show you replace 40% of your staff every year. The cost of recruitment, training, and lost productivity far exceeds that 8%. Sebastian added, "Additionally, hotels that implement better working conditions see increases in guest satisfaction. Happy employees provide better service. It's simple math, but it's math that most businesses ignore because they're obsessed with short-term costs instead of long-term sustainability." Javier looked at the numbers, his expression inscrutable. After what seemed like hours but was probably 3 minutes, he said, "Okay, we'll implement your recommendations, but I want monthly follow-up to ensure this actually works." Marina felt something loosen in her chest, a tension she didn't even know she was holding. "Absolutely. And Mr. Campos, thank you for listening. I know it's not easy to accept criticism about how you run your business. If the criticism comes with concrete solutions, I'm smart enough to listen." After the meeting, as they drove back to the office, Sebastian looked at Marina with a huge smile. "You were incredible in there. I was terrified. It didn't show. You looked like an operations director who knew exactly what she was doing. I was faking it until I made it." That's how we all start. Confidence is just repeated practice until the brain believes the performance. Marina looked out the window as the city passed. This city that had been both prison and home, both challenge and opportunity. "You know what I realized during that presentation?" she finally said. "I realized people like Javier Campos aren't necessarily bad. They're just ignorant. They've never experienced what their employees experience, so they can't imagine it. And when someone finally shows it to them, many of them really want to change." Exactly. That's why this work matters. We're not changing the entire system. That would take legislation and massive political movements. But we're changing small ecosystems, one company at a time. And those small changes add up. The following months were a whirlwind. Impact Hospitality gained 3 more clients. Marina hired her first employee, Patricia Salazar, her former hotel colleague, who had expressed interest in doing more meaningful work. Daniel returned fully to school, participating in advanced art classes and winning an architectural design competition for middle school students. And Marina and Sebastian finally stopped dancing around what they were and made it official. Not with grand declarations or exaggerated romantic gestures, but with a simple conversation one night after dinner with Daniel. "So, is this real?" Marina asked. "Us?" "It feels real to me," Sebastian responded. "Does it feel real to you?" "Terrifying, but real." "Good combination. Means we're risking something that matters." It wasn't perfect. There were nights where they argued about how to balance work responsibilities with personal life. There were moments where differences in their backgrounds created misunderstandings. There were days where Marina felt like an imposter playing businesswoman, and days where Sebastian doubted his decision to abandon the security of the family empire. But there were also mornings where they woke up together with Daniel making terrible pancakes in the kitchen. There were nights where they worked side by side on proposals, combining Marina's lived experience with Sebastian's business training into something more powerful than either individually. There were moments where they looked at each other across a boardroom and recognized in each other's eyes, "We're doing it. We're really doing it." 1 year after Daniel's surgery, Marina organized a small celebration at a local park. It wasn't anything fancy, just a barbecue with Doña Mercedes, Esperanza, Patricia, the Impact Hospitality team, and some of Daniel's classmates. But as Marina watched her son run without pain for the first time in years, chasing a soccer ball with friends, she felt something she barely recognized: complete satisfaction. Sebastian approached from behind, putting an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "About how much has changed in 12 months. Exactly 1 year ago, I was working 3 jobs, counting every peso, unable to see beyond the next week. And now you're operations director of a successful consultancy, enrolled in night classes to finish your degree, and just signed the biggest contract Impact Hospitality has had." Marina turned to look at him. "The Emperor Hotel contract. I still can't believe your brother hired us." "Mateo saw the results you got with Campos Hotel. It's good business to hire people who know what they're doing. Or maybe you're a very good salesman and convinced him." Sebastian smiled. "Could be both." Daniel ran toward them, breathless and radiant. "Mum, look!" He twisted, showing his back. "I can bend without pain. Dr. Ramirez was right. Every month is better." Marina felt tears threaten, the good kind. "You look amazing, my love. And my drawing won the state competition. That means it goes to the national competition. I know, I'm so proud of you." Daniel blushed, then looked between Marina and Sebastian. "So, when are you going to make the official?" "Excuse me?" Marina asked. "You've been together almost a year. You live together because, admit it, Mom, Sebastian spends 6 nights out of 7 at our apartment. You work together. You're basically already family. When are you going to make it legal?" Marina was speechless, but Sebastian laughed. "You know, Daniel, you have a point. Marina, will you marry me?" The proposal was so casual, so completely opposite to any engagement fantasy Marina might have imagined when she was younger, that she initially thought he was joking. "Are you serious?" "Completely. I don't have a ring because honestly I hadn't planned to do this today. But Daniel's right. We're family in all the ways that matter. Let's make it official." Marina looked at her son, who was smiling with so much hope it hurt. She looked at Sebastian, this man who had seen her strength when she only saw survival. She looked around the park, at Mercedes crying happily, though she had obviously heard the proposal from 15 feet away, at Patricia applauding, at her team whistling. "Yes," she said, her voice clear and firm. "Yes, I'll marry you." The kiss that followed was interrupted by Daniel yelling, "Finally!" and hugging them both, creating an awkward but perfect family sandwich. Later that night, after everyone left, and Daniel fell asleep exhausted but happy, Marina and Sebastian sat on their balcony, the same tiny balcony where they had had so many important conversations. "You have to know something," Marina said. "I still sometimes wake up in panic thinking all this is going to disappear, that I'm going to blink and be back working triple shifts, begging for a check to arrive on time." That makes sense. Trauma doesn't disappear just because circumstances improve. Does it ever completely go away? I don't know. But I know it becomes more manageable, and I know you don't have to manage it alone. Marina rested her head on his shoulder. "Fernando showed up at Daniel's school last week, from a distance, just watching. Daniel saw him but decided not to approach. He told me afterward very calmly that he was okay with that if Fernando wanted a real relationship, he knew where to find us." "And how did you feel about it?" "Sad, but also relieved. Because Daniel is no longer waiting for his father to be something Fernando can't be. And that's freedom, in a way. Acceptance usually is. It hurts, but also liberates." Marina thought about the year that had passed, the surgeries and celebrations, the confrontations and reconciliations, the endings and beginnings. She thought about the Marina from 12 months ago, that woman who collapsed in a hotel ballroom because her body literally couldn't anymore. And she felt a wave of love for that version of herself, the woman who fought so hard she almost killed herself, but who finally found another way. "You know what I'm going to do with my first year-end bonus?" Marina asked suddenly. "What?" "I'm going to create a fund for people like me, single mothers, working parents, anyone trapped in the cycle of working so hard they can't see the way out. Free consulting to help them navigate healthcare systems, find training programs, connect with resources, all the things I had to learn on my own." Sebastian looked at her with something that seemed like wonder. That's amazing. Do you want to structure it through impact hospitality?" "No. I want it to be independent. Something mine. Something I built, not because someone gave me an opportunity, but because I now have the resources to give back." "What are you going to call it?" Marina thought for a moment, remembering a phrase Mercedes had said months ago. "Sometimes accepting an extended hand isn't weakness, it's survival strategy. Extended hands, because that's what we need most, people willing to reach down and help others rise up." "Perfect," Sebastian said, kissing her forehead. "Absolutely perfect." And sitting on that balcony Marina had thought was too small, but turned out to be exactly the right size for the most important conversations of her life. They remained quiet, watching the city lights, listening to Daniel's soft breathing from inside, existing in this moment that was simultaneously ordinary and extraordinary. Because in the end, that's what real happiness felt like. Not constant fireworks or romantic drama, but the deep peace of knowing you're exactly where you're supposed to be, with exactly the people who are supposed to be with you. Marina Reyes's story didn't end with a fairy tale ending where all problems magically disappeared. There were still bills to pay. There were still difficult days at work. Daniel still had follow-up medical appointments and occasional bad days where his back hurt. But the difference, the crucial, fundamental difference, was that Marina was no longer alone in those battles. She had a partner who saw her as an equal. She had a chosen family who showed up when it mattered. And she had something she had lost for so many years, she had forgotten how it felt. Genuine hope for the future. 2 years later, Extended Hands had helped 47 families. Daniel had won the National Architecture Competition and been accepted into a prestigious summer program. Marina had completed her degree in hotel administration. Sebastian and Impact Hospitality had expanded to 3 cities. And one ordinary Saturday morning, Marina woke up in the new apartment she and Sebastian had bought together, bigger but not ostentatious, in a better neighborhood but not exclusive, and realized something. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't worried about money. She wasn't worried about the next crisis. She wasn't operating in survival mode. She was simply living. And as she made coffee in her kitchen that finally had enough space for more than one person, as she listened to Daniel laugh in his room while video calling friends, as she watched Sebastian read the newspaper with his reading glasses he hated to admit he needed, Marina felt something she could only describe as complete gratitude. Not gratitude for escaping poverty, though that was part of it, but gratitude for the journey, gratitude for the strength she developed during those 11 months of hell, gratitude for the people who showed up when she needed them most, gratitude for her son, who had shown more maturity and wisdom than most adults, and gratitude for learning, finally, painfully, beautifully, that asking for help isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the bravest